U.S. aircraft carriers conducted drills at the South China Sea in a significant show of force, according to the Navy. CNN reports that the exercise on July 4th was the first in 6 years to involve dual U.S. carrier strike groups in the maritime region. The carriers transited from the Philippine Sea for drills that were seen as a challenge to China's own drills at the Paracel Islands, which saw the firing of an anti-ship missile the previous day. U.S. Navy Institute News reports that Chinese warships observed the carriers. The U.S. carrier strike force consisted of the nuclear-powered warriors Nimitz and Reagan, with more than 60 aircraft each, supported by Arleigh Burke-class guided missiles destroyers and Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers. The Paracel Islands are an archipelago in the disputed South China Sea. China has laid claims to the region. Areas of the South China Sea are also claimed by Taiwan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. The South China Sea is strategically important because it is one of the world's busiest maritime regions. The dueling exercises were followed by a war of words. China's state-run Global Times tweeted, "The U.S. carriers are at the pleasure of the PLA." The U.S. Navy responded by saying, "And yet, there they are." We at TomoNews applaud the U.S.'s commitment to protect Asian nations from the Chinese Communist Party, which has been bothering everyone for no good reason.
China and India have had ongoing disputes over the effective border between the two countries, known as the Line of Actual Control, for decades. The most recent confrontation broke out into a lethal clash that has left at least 20 Indian border troopers dead. Here is what you need to know. Indian and Chinese border defense troops had a deadly encounter last Monday that left at least 20 Indian soldiers, including a colonel, dead, according to the Times of India. The New York Times reports a dozen Indian soldiers remain missing. They are thought to have been captured by Chinese forces. The clash occurred in the Galwan Valley region of eastern Ladakh. Details of the encounter are unclear. However, The Guardian reports that the altercation seems to have happened when Indian border troops unexpectedly met Chinese troops while patrolling. China and India have had decades-long disputes over the Line of Actual Control, which separates the two countries. The two countries fought a war over the region in 1962 and have since continued to have frequent conflicts in the area. And what does China have to say about this deadly incident? Well, according to China's Global Times, it was the Indian troops who provoked the attack by crossing the Line of Actual Control. The jingoistic state-run outlet also claims that the clash was intentionally staged as an effort to take over Chinese territory and deflect attention from India's management of the COVID-19 epidemic. The real question is, how are two growing military powers run by nationalist leaders and armed with nuclear weapons going to de-escalate tensions peacefully when both want to assert their power in the Himalayan border? Let us know what you think, Tomo Sapiens. As the world is distracted by the coronavirus pandemic, China has stepped up military activities all over the place aimed at intimidating or provoking its neighbors. There was Monday's attack in the Himalayas that left 20 Indian soldiers dead at last count and dozens missing. Pressures in Malaysia and Indonesia in the South China Sea, the ramming of a Vietnamese fishing boat last week. But we're particularly worried about what now looks like a deliberate pattern of escalations over the Taiwan Strait. Here is what you need to know. Taiwan's Air Force on June 17th again warned off Chinese warplanes that approached the country, the Defense Ministry said, reporting the fourth such intrusion in just 9 days. The Chinese J-10, a fighter jet, and Y-8, a turboprop surveillance aircraft, entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone to the southwest of the country on Wednesday. Taiwanese fighter planes issued a verbal warning to the Chinese aircraft to leave, and the Chinese planes immediately left the air defense identification zone. The latest incursion came just 1 day after a J-10 fighter entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone from the southwest. It was issued radio warnings to leave and then escorted out of Taiwanese airspace. That followed a flight in the same area on June 12th by a Chinese Y-8, which was issued a verbal warning by Taiwan's Air Force to leave its airspace. The Y-8 flight came only a few hours after Taiwan announced it had conducted missile tests at 2 locations off its eastern coast. Taiwan did not say what missiles were tested, but Tiancong-3 surface-to-air missiles and Yongfeng land attack cruise missiles were tested in the same area in April. Such incursions were rare until a year ago, when in March of 2019, 2 Chinese J-11 fighter jets crossed over the median line in the Taiwan Strait for the first time in years. Beijing also sailed its Shandong aircraft carrier through the strait in December, shortly before Taiwan's presidential election.
A top U.S. military official says China has slowed construction and island building in the South China Sea as it has achieved its immediate military goals for the region. The South China Morning Post reports that during a presentation at the Brookings Institute, General Joseph Dunford claimed Chinese President Xi Jinping had reneged on a promise in 2016 to then-President Obama not to militarize the South China Sea. Despite overlapping claims by several different countries, Beijing asserts ownership of the South China Sea based on historic rights. In recent years, it began a massive building program to reclaim land in the disputed region by increasing the size of existing reefs or creating new islands. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, China has constructed ports, military installations, and airstrips on islands in the Paracels and Spratlys. Woody Island, in particular, has been militarized through the deployment of fighter jets, cruise missiles, and a radar system. According to Dunford, building on the Chinese-claimed islands has been slowing, likely because they've been developed to the point where they can provide the military capability required by the Chinese. He warns that future expansion in the area must be checked with clear and collective action, and not necessarily with a military response, as diplomatic and economic tools can also be used to hold people accountable. While the U.S. has no official position on territorial claims in the disputed South China Sea, it periodically conducts freedom of navigation operations to challenge Beijing's claims and maintain open sea lanes. This entails passing close to China-claimed reefs, which draws the ire of the Chinese. The South China Morning Post reports that China had recently begun construction on its third aircraft carrier, which is expected to expand its ability to launch larger and more varied aircraft. Beijing's military buildup has led Washington to develop long-range missiles that can be launched beyond the range of Chinese missile defense systems. The U.S. is likewise adapting its naval strategy to deal with a rival that may challenge its ability to navigate globally. According to Dunford, there is also a need to improve military communication between the U.S. and China. Over the past decade, the U.S. has tried and failed to establish regular communication between top military officials to improve understanding, something analysts attribute to a cultural difference.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.